This is CounselCast, part of the Legal Talk Network, and I'm your host, Karin Conroy. When you face a complex case outside your expertise, you bring in a co-counsel for next-level results. When you want to engage, expand, and elevate your firm, you bring in a marketing co-counsel. In this podcast, I bring in marketing experts who each answer one big question to help your firm achieve more. Here's today's guest.
Hey, I'm Hemant Varshney. I'm the founder and CEO of Digicom. I'm very excited to be on CounselCast today. Karin, thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Hemant, for being here. This is going to be an interesting conversation. We were talking about kind of how to make this sound more glossy, but honestly, I feel like, we're all grown-ups. We can just kind of talk about the topic in terms of how to grow law firms. And this is an important one that I feel like gets overlooked a lot. So with all of that build up, the topic and the title for the show today is Strategies for Growth through Client Retention. So we're going to talk a lot about client retention and why that matters and why that's a big deal. And I feel like you've been around long enough, and so have I. And you kind of realize a certain amount of time into your career that sales is not all about going out and just getting more and more and more and that top of the funnel and bringing people in, right? Like all of a sudden, I feel like at some point there was this light bulb moment where I was like, it would be a lot smarter to just hang on to the ones that I have and focus on building that. And, they're already here. They're already warm and welcome. And so let's talk about that, Hemant. So let's talk about you. And you also have a history of huge client retention, 82%, right? I think that was what I read in the info you sent over. So what are some strategies that you have?
Yeah, I think, everybody loves the top line fancy growth numbers, and I've fallen trapped to that too. It's just,
yes.
It's part of business. It's part of the excitement. It's part of the allure. But, with all that growth, if your clients are churning, you bring a client in month one and they're gone month two, you put in a lot of effort and work, and the reality of the ROI on that specific deal or that client might just not be there. Maybe you spent $10,000 going to a trade show and you landed a client and you netted $5,000 and that was it, and so you're in the whole $5,000, right? Like very very like straightforward, simple way to think about it. And client retention is super important. If you're any sort of service-based business, it's about delivering good service. It's about building that relationship. It's about providing information and helping your partners out in any which way you can. And, there's this whole scope creep, like, oh, this is out of our purview. But there's so many different strategies that, I'd love to just kind of talk through.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of these things where people, even early in my career, I would have friends or family say, what's the difference between marketing and advertising? And I think people generally think of, first of all, marketing and advertising and all of those things all in one little tiny narrow category. And even like attorneys look and they're like, okay, I see a billboard for this, say personal injury attorney every time I drive to my office. That's their marketing. And it's like, there's so much more. There is traditional marketing, there's offline marketing, there's every other part of marketing. And we've had so many episodes lately where we're talking about this reputation building side of marketing, where providing good service and doing a great job is part of your marketing strategy. And I'm not just saying this kind of like hyperbolic, like this. Doing great work is going to then boost your referrals. It's going to boost your name out there. So that's kind of what we're digging into today. Doing great work, providing, that kind of experience for your clients that you create a reputation.
Yeah. And, I guess like if we break this down into multiple categories for retention, right? Let's just say the first is testimonial and social proof, right?
Yes.
The work you do, just like you mentioned, Karin, it's important. Be a good partner. Listen to what your partners are looking for. Identify challenges and be this support system if you can. Sometimes you're not able to like solve for that issue, but maybe if you're not able to solve for that issue and you have a partner that is able to, say your client needs some sort of liability insurance and you work with, you represent a liability insurance, person, lack of better words right now, you can connect them, right? And so like there's a value add there. Or if your client is not understanding something in the way maybe you're providing that information, trying to break it down and ask them like, hey, like, what part of this isn't very clear? Like, how can I provide you this information in the clearest way possible? That builds relationships.
Yeah.
That earns the testimonials and that social proof. That's so important.
Yeah. And also kind of setting up your systems. And I feel like it's a constant review and adjustment with your systems. I have gone through my systems and had different ways of doing a similar, I've done a similar kind of work for more than 15 years, but I've done it differently, probably at least 10 or 15 different ways. So I used to have, a certain kind of intake call, and then I used to have a certain kind of process for proposals, and I used to have a certain kind of process for going through the project and following up on the project and, taking care of the clients afterwards. And I've gone through each of those steps of that client kind of lifespan completely differently over the years. And so reviewing and making sure that you've got the best systems, and then recognizing that needs to change over time as well.
Yeah. And that feedback loop, right? Like I'm sure as you've been changing the systems, it's because of feedback you've either gotten internally or from your clients. Something I like to ask partners on deals that we don't sign, it's, hey, why did you decide not to go with us? Is there anything we could have done better? Please let us know so that we can be better for our partners in the future. And sometimes it's, a couple of years ago, it was, hey, you don't offer creative services and we need that. So I built out an entire creative team so that would never be an issue again.
Yes.
And that also increased our stick with clients. So once we provided the creative support, our clients just stayed with us much longer, right? And that helped with that overall retention. So that feedback loop is very important.
It's huge. If you can get them to reply, because let's be honest, we all have a million emails. We all have all these requests for our thoughts and feedback and all of that stuff, and it's like, everybody says it's just 1 quick minute. Well, 1 quick minute times however many emails you have adds up pretty quickly. Recognizing that you're not going to get every single person to respond and say why they didn't choose to work with you. But when you get those feedback emails, it's amazing because you have to recognize that it's probably representing at least 10 or 20 other interactions that you had with other people similar to that. It's kind of like roaches. You see one, there's probably at least 100 more, right?
Oh man, yes.
But, in a good way. Like if you get the feedback, it probably represents at least, a handful of other people that felt the same way. So yeah, if you have a process for following up, and it's kind of a painful, awkward question to ask, like why didn't you want me, but at the same time, if you can get that feedback, super valuable. So break it down, some of the processes that you have in place to make sure that you kind of give that sort of experience that keeps your clients sticking with you.
Sure. So, before we take on any project, the first part is we audit their work. It's a free audit. There are partners out there that will charge like $2,000 to $4,000 to do the audit we do. We do it for free. A lot of people will come back to me and be like, why don't you charge for it? The reason we do not charge for it is because I want to know if that goal the client wants to hit is actually attainable.
Yes.
That's the first part.
Yeah.
And being real about it. Sometimes these goals aren't attainable and you'll put the media plan together, you put all the information together, and you might be like halfway through that plan and you realize, hey, you're not going to hit that goal.
But if they've already hired you and they're spending however many thousands of dollars for this audit, then you feel responsible to a goal that's not attainable. And so it puts you in this really awkward position where they've hired you, they want to do this thing, and they're saying, listen, I want to build a rocket and I want to get to Mars by Tuesday, and here's some money. And they assume that money is going to do whatever thing they throw at you. But I think that's really smart that you bring them in without any kind of false pretense. Like, okay, let's take a look, and then we're going to work together to set a goal. Like, I don't have the ability to get you to Mars by Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like, the goal might be like, hey, we want to spend $10 and make $100. But in reality, they might be able to spend $10 and only make $12. And so doing that audit allows me to understand, hey, can we get you to the point you're looking for or not? And do we have similar partners we've worked with where I can take like in-market, data points to understand if this is achievable. So we do the audit first. Yep.
So I have a question. So in that process, do you have a way of kind of evaluating those clients as well? I mean, I've been doing this long enough, and I think you have too, where part of knowing who is going to be a great long-term client is kind of evaluating them from the beginning and knowing that if they don't meet a certain set of criteria, that it's going to be a lot of waste of time and effort, and it's never going to work out in a certain way. So do you do that also?
Yeah, and this is more like qualitative than quantitative. The audit is entirely quantitative. The qualitative part is the partner willing to take some of the feedback, and, is the partner excited to make the changes, or are they going to loop the right team members in? Because like oftentimes if they're leaders in the organizations and they're the ones fingers to keyboards, it's like sometimes it's very guarded for them, right? It's like, no, like I run this process, it's mine. And those partners might be hard to work with because they're so hands to keyboards for running their marketing versus running the business, right?
Yeah.
So when we find like friction points like that, I will talk to the team and, before, like, say the numbers that the partner wants are achievable, it's also, hey, are we a good fit? So I will ask my team, and 8 out of 10 times I'll probably listen to my team, like, 80% of the time. Yeah. And if they're like, hey, don't think they'll be a good partner, then, we're just kind of candid with the client, like, hey, your goals are achievable, we just don't think we're the right fit. Like,
what are some examples of a not good fit?
I have an example where someone's not a good fit, and I have an example of a partner that we've done the audit, we are testing through this stuff, and it's not working. Okay. So the first part, right, is we were working with a partner, we did the audit, they were asking they basically wanted the audit. So we present the audits, but we don't share them with the partner because you can easily take the audit and not hire us or give it to your existing agency or whatever it is. So we went back and forth. They wanted a media plan. And we executed across a lot of work after we would sign a contract. And then we were kind of like, the ball was kicked down, and you're just kind of like jostled around here and there. And it's like, okay, this probably isn't going to be a good partner for us. Like that's one example. And, the other example, great partner, absolutely great partner. And we are doing everything we can for this specific partner, running tests quickly, developing the creatives, providing all the feedback. The issue we're running into is that the media buying costs we forecast for similar products that we are running, it's almost 4 times the cost for this other partner, right? And so the math just doesn't work out. And so instead of holding the partner to, the 2-3 month period we have, like our contracts are the first basically 90 days, then it's month to month. Instead of holding this partner to the first 90 days, we've gone through a month of like really rigorous testing. We need certain things on the site rebuilt. And instead of holding the partner to the 90 days, we're like, hey, let's test this one more week. Let's get all the learnings. Let's give you a wrap-up campaign report. We will help you build this other piece and not charge you for the next 2 months because it's throwing money down the window. And that's just being a good partner.
Yeah, exactly. And so then they realize that you're kind of an honest and truthful place. They can actually see kind of the results of where they're trying to go. And it just feels like a different kind of relationship than where the first example that you were providing. Okay, so what other kinds of things do you do long term? Like, let's say you've done a kind of involved project with a client. And then let's say it's something like a website. You launch the website. How do you keep them around? And obviously this is different for a law firm than it would be for a marketing agency. But what kind of strategies do you use? Because for a lawyer, a lot of times they'll have some issue that comes up, similar to our work where we're doing a project or a website or something, and there's a significant thing like the website or a legal issue, and then it kind of goes quiet, but they want to keep them, involved and sort of aware that they're there if they need it. So what do you guys do for that?
We use Slack for communication. And, maybe other lawyers might use Microsoft Teams or something of that nature. We have direct channels with all of our partners. So if our partners have a question, they can ping us, and, most of the times within 2 to 3 hours, they'll have an answer of whatever it is they like, the information they're looking for. And so that direct line of communication, it builds that relationship with the client. It builds the trust, and it creates longevity, whereas if the partner is working with another agency, that other agency will only jump on calls with them once every 2 weeks, versus for us, it's hey, you want to speak today? Sure, here's the time. If we can't do it today, here's the time tomorrow. And we'll answer your questions pretty, in a fair amount of time. It's a couple hours. So that's important. Yeah,
it is. And I feel like I know I've seen all these different surveys and, reports on basically just communication and the way that law firms are really poor. I know there was a recent one that talked about the number of firms that, first of all, they just don't even answer. They don't have a receptionist service. They just have a voicemail where when someone is calling for a legal issue and you don't answer, they're not going to wait around. They're going to go to the next guy. So that basic concept of communication and being responsive, that seems so sort of basic, but it's amazing these days who doesn't reply, who doesn't respond, who doesn't have a system set up. Listen, I don't respond to every single call immediately. I've got other things going on in my day. If I were to get a phone call while we're recording this episode, I'm obviously not going to pick up the phone. But I have a system and a receptionist service set up so that the phone is answered, and it's answered by a human. And then it's handled in a way that's professional and they feel like they're taken care of. So it's not like it's just going into nowhere land. It's handled. So just setting up systems for that kind of stuff seems super basic, but you have to do it. This is basic business stuff.
It is. And with with AI and automation, and you lose this human element, and especially for something that is legal, and somebody might have anxiety or a pressure and they need some sort of information. Yeah. Having that receptionist service, sure, it might cost you, a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 more a month, but you continue to build rapport with your clients, and they understand that there is somebody there, and that is so invaluable and it is often forgotten right now.
Well, and honestly, you should be able to pretty quickly and easily put a value on that. If you're getting so many calls a month and you look at how many you wouldn't have answered, and if just one in any way pays for a thing, it pretty much covers the cost of that service. So it should be one of those services that pays for itself at least a few times over. If not, you're kind of using it wrong. But okay, so basic communication. It sounds like some of these things are so common and easily understood, but I think people skip over them because of that reason. So basic communication, staying on top of things, giving people an understanding of what they're in for before they actually start paying you for anything. What else do you use to, kind of keep your client retention rate so high?
I love getting to know our clients on a personal level outside of just work. So if we can go do happy hour, we can go do dinner. If I am traveling across Europe and I have clients in Europe, I will make sure to stop by, say hello, and talk about something else that's just doesn't have to do business. Do you love golf? Do you love cars? Is it fashion week? What is it that excites you? What makes you tick outside of the working world? Because, we're connected to everything these days, and it's good to know your clients on that, like on a personal level, especially because if there is an event going on, I'm going to use Fashion Week, and our client loves fashion, and it's like, hey, I saw this thing on the news. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah.
And like doing it in a meaningful way where you actually care, not
Yeah.
in a way where it's like, oh, I saw this. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, it's like, hey, no, this was really cool. I thought maybe you could check this out. And what do
Yeah.
you think? Like building that sort of
Rapport.
understanding and rapport and
Yeah.
being a human over just a business person that, is getting paid, I think goes so far beyond in building relationships and is just so unbelievably important.
It 100%. I have some clients that I've been working with since the first year I started my agency, which is going on 15 years now, and 100% of, not 100% of the reason that they continue to work with me, but I would say well over 50% of the reason that they continue working with me is they feel like they know me, and they feel not only do they know me, but they know I can just handle it. And so they don't necessarily know what their questions are, but I've got the answers, and we've been working with each other for so many years that I've got this historical knowledge of their firm that would be really hard to replace by just getting some other person. And so we get on the phone and it's like, hey, this thing came up. And oh, you know what? That ties back to that other thing that happened 4 years ago. Or also, we just know each other personally, and it just feels like this is a colleague. This is someone I know. It's not just this sort of faceless person on the other end of an email. And so that's super, super important to kind of have a face and a personality and a relationship with that other person as a human being. I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kinds of things do you actually do in terms of do you send out any sort of little client gifts or reminders, or what kind of actual tactics do you use for keeping in touch or communicating with them?
Yeah. So during the holidays, we'll send out like gift baskets and, have gift baskets pretty much, but but that's during the holiday. I think we do less just gift giving in that sense. But if I'm going to a client's office and I know they like red wine, I will get a bottle of red wine, or, their kids love this specific cookies and I'm down the block and I'll, buy a box of those cookies and bring, but that's where the personal relationship part is important. So you can be a good partner and show that you care. And the fact that you remember these small details shows that you actually care, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, like when I think back over, there's been probably a handful of sales experiences that I've had where I got off the phone or, walked away from whatever that experience was. And I was like, that person was a master at kind of either client engagement or retention or just sales in general. I think of these handful of people from time to time, and these are the things that make you really good at sales, retention, business in general, are all of those little details, kind of having a conversation that doesn't feel so smarmy and salesy and feels much more human. And learning how to do that is really an art.
Yeah, it's an art. It's also a lot of listening. Like it's being patient and listening and understanding, and sometimes putting yourself in your client's position of like, hey, they're going through X, Y, and Z. They might feel like this is how we can help. And it's that, how can we help? Right?
Right. Exactly. Well, and that leads right into my next question, which is, do you have a system for kind of follow up and going back to clients after a certain amount of time and saying, like you were just saying, how can we help? What's next? What do you need from us? What are you trying to do that we could support? Do you have a system for that?
So I've used SurveyMonkey, and I have basically done the whole net promoter score kind of system to understand if your client will promote you, how they feel about, your services. And then I also like to ask, if there is something that we are not doing and that can help you, what would that what would you like us to do more so? Sometimes we'll get information of, hey, you know, reporting can be more streamlined, or X, Y, and Z can happen. And if we see a pattern with multiple partners saying the same thing, then it's, hey team, here's what we found out.
Yeah.
How do we make this better?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Just kind of asking the questions and letting it be sort of open-ended. I feel like I'm kind of such a systems person that I sort of want to put things in buckets and sort of, I think we all naturally want to sort of categorize things. But if you're asking for feedback about how things could be better, it's probably not an answer you already have, right? So you need to leave this as, like, I'm picturing forms, you know, like your name, your email. This needs to be the big open box option where you are just letting them free form and fill in information so that you can get that super valuable feedback and make things better. All right, so it is time for the book review. If you're looking for some inspiration for your reading list, we have this really cool, if I do say so myself, library on the website of all the books that our guests have recommended. Business books usually tied to the topic that we're talking about. And so, Hemant, what's the book that you're going to add to our library that you want to recommend today?
I'm going to recommend Ray Dalio's book called Principles.
Okay, tell us about that.
So Ray Dalio, he owns the largest private hedge fund in the world.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and basically his book of principles are principles that he created over time to help him be a better, you know, entrepreneur, family member, husband, father, and it talks about all different principles that you could create and employ in your life. One of the most important principles, it's create your own principles. Like, what are your actual values and morals?
Oh, I think that's good. You know, yeah. Because, I mean, it makes you sit down and not just sort of like rinse and repeat and take what other people have already said. It makes you really think it through.
Exactly. And I think it's a great book because it's taught me a lot of different things and made me question or understand, like, what are some of my principles? Like, there's a principle that's Ray Dalio's, like, just, you know, be cautious of someone that speaks in absolutes. And that's Ray's principles, right? But, like, as I was reading through this, I was reading through another book, 10X Rule, Grant Cardone, before I even knew who Grant Cardone was. And there were just so many things in absolutes in this book. And I was just reading through it and I was just like, but this isn't absolute. This isn't like, it doesn't, you know, fit so many different frameworks. Yeah. And then I Googled Grant Cardone and it's just like, you know, he's a just speaker, billionaire person, like just doing all these things. But even after I learned all of that about Grant Cardone, I still don't agree that, you know, things are in absolutes. There are specific, there's just, you know, specific, unique situations to everything. Ended up using things I learned from 10X Rule for Digicom, right? But yeah, that's just one of my principles. Like, things aren't absolute. Things are unique. Yeah.
And honestly, and I like the part about it's like, be kind of wary of the people that are speaking in absolutes, because first of all, a lot of times there are these coaches, and coaches have become such a trendy thing. And there are some really awesome, valuable coaches out there, but then there's a lot of not. There's a lot of ones. So it's become sort of this very muddied, really high traffic area of the world where it's like, I do 100% agree. If you're speaking in absolutes, you are talking about one little narrow part of a certain kind of an industry, and you likely don't know what my business is like, what my clients are like, the kind of work that we do, and how we adjust for their specific kinds of needs. And so your absolute, even if it could be so much more valuable if you just take it down to 60, 70% of what you're trying to say and like walk it back a little bit and say, hey, listen, this applies to XYZ and it would be different in your situation by the following ways. And it just, all of a sudden you become so much more trustworthy by saying that instead of saying, this is the only way. This is the only way you can do things. And, you know, I've learned this the hard time. I've done a lot of different coaching programs and all of that stuff. I've read a million different business books, and I've tried things that absolutely didn't work. And learned the hard way that, no, I had this figured out, and the way I was doing it was right. It just needed a minor tweak, not this complete left turn.
Yeah.
So I think that's super valuable. This sounds awesome. And I really think it ties in to just add one more point with everything that we're talking about, because we're talking about marketing ideas, but they really are principles. They're all about kind of being human, being just a great person at whatever you're doing, and kind of setting these rules for how you're going to run your business. And so then as long as you've kind of defined these rules, then, it's much more likely that it'll be successful. So my next question, which I've kind of led into, is what's a big takeaway that you'd like everyone to get from this episode?
I think that it's important for the listeners to, we're speaking about retention and we're speaking about marketing, right? But to have all of that, it's very important to be a good partner, whether it's in your, personal life or it's with a specific client. Put yourself in their shoes, understand their pain points. If they're not understanding what you're trying to inform them, maybe try something else. And it's not about it's not all about dollars and cents. It's about helping people for, at Digicom, it's helping our partners grow their businesses, right? And sometimes it's a hard conversation of, hey, we can't, we think we can get you here, but we actually can't, and we don't want to hold you to a contract that we don't think we can, do. And so that's putting our partners first, right? So
we want to be honest with you. We expect to do XYZ, but we're not going to guarantee it because of the following variables that are outside of our control. So we're not going to pretend like we have control over Google, because that would be nice, but we don't. Or whatever the case might be. But we're going to be really honest and upfront with you and not promise you things that we're going to later regret and you're later going to be upset about. Yeah. And so, that kind of goes in line with everything that you're saying. Just be a great human, do a great job, all of those things. But it then leads into you having a great business.
Exactly.
Awesome. Hemant Varshney is the founder and CEO of Digicom, and we were talking a lot about client retention, but also just these great principles, which is the book that we will link to, obviously, on the show notes and everything. And all of these things that lead to a path of client retention that then brings you the kind of revenue that's so much easier and so much more manageable. And what I've found over time is these retained clients, they trust you, they bring in more money. It's the best client you can possibly have. So figuring out how to do that and get more of those is really the best path to a more sustainable, calm, successful business from what I've seen. So thank you so much. I thought that was a great conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the CounselCast podcast. Be sure to visit our website at counsel-cast.com for the resources mentioned on the episode and to give us your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.